Hello, everyone, and welcome. Today's webinar, 5 ways to turn nonprofit compliance into a donor-attracting profit center without the soul-sucking hassle, missed deadlines, or sky-high professional fees. Thank you so much for your time and for being here today with us. My name is Kevin Kavinsky, and I'm a donor growth strategist with Stewardship Technologies. I'm really proud to introduce one of our newest partners and today's presenter, Christian Lefeur, the founder and CEO of InstantNonprofit.com. Christian's mission is to make a global impact by empowering tens of thousands of faith-based and nonprofit organizations to grow their 501c3 while tapping into the fullest expression of what each of us was created to become. His work at the moment is interviewing successful nonprofit and business founders about leadership, best practices, personal development, and navigating change in today's shape-shifting environment. If anyone has any interest in being on his show, feel free to reach out at the end of the webinar. Christian has been a consultant and trainer for nonprofit executives, has raised millions of dollars as a professional fundraiser and copywriter, and has served on board as a board member and volunteer for a number of organizations. Prior to devoting himself exclusively to nonprofit founders, Christian spent nearly 2 decades in the world of issue advocacy and of bolstering the freedoms we all cherish. He's a dedicated father of 3 teenagers, an avid dirt biker, and hails from sunny Denver, Colorado. Welcome, Christian.
So thank you everyone for being here. If you could just drop us your city, where you're coming from. I'm really interested to see where everybody hails from on this webinar, and we're going to get started right away. Apologies for the mic check, but thank you very much. Denver, Texas, awesome. It's nice to have people from other countries. The nation of Texas coming in here. Mount Vernon, Ohio, Columbus, Denver. Excellent. Well, I'm really looking forward to this. I see that we have some of our own people from Instant Nonprofit. We have plenty of folks from Stewardship, and so we are live and ready to go. Well, today's webinar is 5 ways to turn nonprofit compliance into a donor-attracting profit center without the soul-sucking hassle, missed deadlines, or sky-high professional fees. As Kevin said, my name is Christian Lefeur, and I'm the founder and CEO of InstantNonprofit.com. My background is in major gifts, fundraising, direct mail. There isn't much that I haven't been involved with over the years in nonprofits. And I'm a proud foster and adoptive parent. And I have other causes that, of course, I believe in and I serve on boards, etc. So just a little bit of housekeeping. It's always important, of course, to focus on one thing. And with a little bit of ADHD, I understand how hard that is. So I try to turn off some other things and just stay focused right here. We're going to walk through this at a brisk pace in about 45 minutes, and we will do a Q&A at the end, etc. But just sit back. If you're not familiar with where the chat is in Zoom, that is a really important function. So go ahead and pull in the chat, and then we will we'll move forward here. Grab your notes worksheet. Now we are going to throw a worksheet into the chat. Link, I realize it's probably a little bit late to download and print it out, but it might just help you follow along, and certainly after the fact you can take notes, and it does have some important contact information, etc., for how to follow up if you need to. Now, who is this webinar for? It's always important to cover the kinds of people that this information pertains to. You might be a director or somebody in a key stakeholder role in your nonprofit. You might be a development raising money and you're looking to improve your donor engagement. Or you might just be anyone who wants to understand entity compliance and wants to avoid IRS or state revocation and dissolution and seek these avenues of turning, a burden into a blessing. So today's agenda, we're going to really quickly overview what is compliance and why are we here today. Some changes in donor behavior and how compliance plays a role, and 5 ways to leverage compliance in your marketing and donor relations. I know compliance is not really an exciting, sexy topic, but it actually, in today's environment, is more important than ever, and really something that can make your nonprofit stand out in a sea of overwhelming information, distraction, and marketing. We'll cover the avenues to get it done, and then we'll go into Q&A and make sure that we follow your questions and answer them. So following the webinar, if you stay till the end, you'll receive in the next 24 hours a PDF on the 5 ways to leverage compliance. So yes, you can take notes, but we'll also send you a nice PDF to follow, and it'll have step-by-step on how to leverage it. If you want to get a compliance audit, you can let us know at the end. We will give you a link, and you can sign up for a free compliance audit and or book a no obligation strategy session. So who is Instant Nonprofit? Very quickly, I'm the founder and CEO. Will and Jordan are here as part of the moderating team, and we have created over 3,000 charities operating all over the world from end to end. It's a really done for you process so that you can focus on your mission, which is our core mission, is helping founders focus on their own mission. We've been serving with a global impact, and I know that the folks that have signed up for this webinar, I've seen some of the list, and the organization's super impressive and such important missions. The way that we started was a little bit of frustration about how nonprofits are treated in the business world. They're kind of that ignored segment often, and corporate gets a lot of attention, but we really believe that nonprofit founders elevated and educated and edified in a way that is going to help you be more effective in your mission. And our early projects were just sort of volunteer projects. But this company was born out of a little bit of moral outrage when we realized my sister is developmentally disabled. And when I was 8 years old, I learned that she would be like all of the other kids, got involved in Special Olympics, etc. And then fast forward 20 years, I volunteered to help start a nonprofit and was just appalled to learn how hard it is and how long it takes and all of that stuff to start a nonprofit. And we set about fixing. So we're super proud of where we've been and of our mission to really unlock the potential in every nonprofit and in every founder and stakeholder in the nonprofit world. So that's that. Let's get on with it with the what you're here for, which is, what is entity compliance? Why does it matter? And how can you actually turn it from a burden into a blessing? So essentially at its core, the IRS has certain requirements to file 990s. States also have requirements for reporting, and more states are actually adding on to those. So the state level annual report and the 990 have been around for a long time, but states like California and Washington are adding to the burdens of what do you need to do to keep your organization compliant. And no one wants to get one of those nasty mailings that says trouble or you failed to file something. And now you have, X number of days to do so, or there's a penalty involved, et cetera. So let's not experience, those challenges just because we're trying to do something good in the world. And then, of course, I want to address fundraising registration compliance, because that comes up in any conversation regarding entity compliance. Fundraising compliance is a different animal, and we're going to cover that on a different webinar, and you can certainly reach out and we can book a call to help you with that. Fundraising compliance is different because it's dependent on where you're operating and what kind of fundraising you're doing. So it's very, very much on a case by case, whereas entity compliance, every single nonprofit must do no matter where you are. There's a state patchwork that is a little bit hard to understand sometimes what applies in your state versus others, but it is fundamental to every nonprofit just to maintain the existence of the entity. As I said, we'll provide a link toward the end where you can book a call and get some help. We'll walk right through your case with you and evaluate and even do an audit if you like. Why is entity compliance important? Unlike other requirements, failure to complete these filings will result in termination, revocation, dissolution, whatever word you want to use for that. It's a hard stop. And so secretaries of state routinely dissolve non-compliant nonprofits, and the IRS has in fact revoked the tax exempt status of over 800,000 nonprofits since 2010. And that was over 250,000 in one shot when they created some new laws that said if you're not current on certain filings for a period of time, then you will be revoked and you have to go through this painful reinstatement process. So again, let's move on and why this is so hard. Each state has their own unique process. And frankly, this is not what we focus on. This is not why we started the nonprofit. One of the big issues with nonprofits is that people who come to work for nonprofits, or maybe you're relying on volunteers, and there is a lot of turnover, especially in today's job market, where there's intense competition for people who actually show up and get the job done. There's also focus on the other things. You are here to serve a mission, not necessarily you didn't start your nonprofit to file paperwork. And then there's also the confusing spammy mailings that you've gotten. Maybe some of these, they show up in the mailbox, they say you're in big trouble. It's kind of like the mailings that you might have seen where someone says, that sends you a mailing that you need to renew your URL, right? Your domain name. And what they're trying to do is actually charge you an arm and a leg to switch URL hosting companies, right? Who's your registrar? And they do the same thing with nonprofit filings, and they'll make it look like an official mailing, but it's really some from a company that's trying to get you to pay extra for their service. So feel free, throw your annual nonprofit maintenance frustrations in the chat, because are, you know, as varied as there are nonprofits out there. And it doesn't have to be that way. We're going to try to give you some avenues to get this stuff done and to not have this be a concern so that you can focus on your mission. And we're going to cover 5 ways to leverage entity compliance for your organization. So let's just jump right into those. Strategy number 1 is to leverage the many online databases that we have available to us out in the world. There are state-based databases, there's GuideStar, Top Nonprofits, ProPublica. There are so many databases out there. Now, some are more used by donors than others, but it's becoming a common practice. And if you think about the question, just because the IRS approved your organization for 501c3 tax-exempt status, does that mean they endorse your mission? Well, the answer to that question, of course, is no. The IRS is just making sure that you reach certain criteria in order to get the tax status so that you're tax exempt. But the real answer to that question is, and this is answering like a lawyer, it actually depends. Because the perception that the IRS endorses your mission is what's really important. And that's why organizations get their 501c3. Not only do you get tax deductibility, but there's a little bit of halo that your organization receives when you get that IRS letter. And it gives people permission to go, well, even if I'm not giving to them and getting a tax deduction, am I volunteering for an organization that's legitimate? So merely being listed in the IRS database as a 501c3 or sharing your letter of determination of tax exempt status might as well come with a little gold star that conveys legitimacy and certainty in the eyes of not only donors, but all stakeholders. Well, the same holds true of any number of online databases that your nonprofit can leverage along with its compliant status. Many or most of these services that we've listed here in this short list, and there are many more, they incorporate compliant status as part of the criteria they measure to affirm an organization's legitimacy. Now, that starts with just the fact that you're a 501c3 in good standing. But if you are on Great Nonprofits or GuideStar or Charity Navigator, and you've bothered to create a little bit of a profile there, which is free for the lowest level and on almost all of these databases, then you can actually put their logo on your materials. And it does tend to, that will differentiate you from other organizations. And so that's a beautiful thing about how you can take something like compliance, which most of these databases do talk about your compliance status, And you can actually turn that around into something positive by putting these logos on and just giving someone who is on the fence, maybe they have a limited amount of money, they want to decide between two charities, they're going to choose the one that they feel is the most legitimate and a sure bet. No one wants to feel stupid after giving to a nonprofit. Strategy number 2 is to infuse your message and marketing. Now, if you make a commitment to compliance part of your public-facing marketing strategy, that includes donor recognition, cultivation practices, and you include disclosure statements in acknowledges and compliance messages in your campaign updates and annual reports, really anything that's public-facing, then that's going to make a difference to some people. We are living in an age where what used to be called best practices are simply becoming expected practices. And like how whoever here is familiar, and if you deal with large dollar donors, many of them are also angel investors. They make investments in small startup companies to grow that money. And just like angel investors are becoming more professional through training, networking, angel investment organizations, those same people are being educated by foundations like the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and others out there that are helping them become more professional in their philanthropy. And part of that professionalism across the entire spectrum of those who give, whether they're occasional donors or emerging philanthropists, are adopting due diligence as a habit. Now, due diligence is just a fancy term for a background check. Before giving to any organization, they'll make a cursory look at your website and marketing material, and they'll also check any number of handy sources and databases that might have even been given to them as a checklist by a philanthropy organization. Maybe they looked up, maybe Googled how to make sure I'm giving to a legitimate nonprofit. And up in that search is going to pop a checklist or certain, best practices, things that people who want to give should go through prior to giving to a nonprofit. And that's going to be checking these databases. It's also going to be making sure that your marketing materials across the board, from website to print to social, are all congruent. And one way that you can create that congruence for especially the people who compliance is important to them and sort of having your affairs in order is important is by making sure that your message, that throughout your messaging. It's super important for donor cultivation and retention as well. Over years, donors can fall off or they can get attracted to another organization that's maybe doing similar work to what you're doing, or maybe in a completely different field. And we have seen values change. We've seen a re-examination of what people are focusing on in, from the pandemic. And so it's really important for retention of donors as well. Now, one idea that came into us, and I love this idea, is you can create your own badge. So we mentioned leveraging other organizations' logos in your compliance efforts and your marketing around compliance and just kind of having your affairs in order and your legitimacy. Well, you can create your own badge and put a little shield and your logo and say, 100% compliant. Now, obviously, that is representing yourself, which is less perhaps legitimate in the eyes of someone who relies on those other organizations for legitimacy. But if you have a badge and you say, we check our compliance every year, and you feature that in your marketing materials, that can be super powerful. And this, due diligence gets more stringent as you go up the food chain. That is important to remember. So potential foundation grant makers, corporate sponsors, community partners, and their board members now routinely review a nonprofit's compliance. And if you just remind them across the board in your marketing, that's going to be very, very important. And more important as time goes on and people look out for scams, because we have seen rampant scams all over the place with ransomware. They shut down a nationally critical pipeline this year. A small group of hackers use ransomware to do that. So people are more concerned as online giving goes up, they're going to be checking online sources to make sure that your organization is legitimate. So with half of states requiring nonprofits to include disclosure, things like that. Why not just apply that across your marketing? All right, so strategy number 3 is to leverage those required disclosures. I did want to mention on strategy number 2, you can actually use calls to action, and we're going to show that both strategy number 2 and strategy number 3, which is leveraging those disclosures. And that's going to employ what I call the Cinderella factor. We've covered marketing and messaging, means your printed materials, your website, and your other communications. But what about those messages you are required to provide, and which your donors know are required for you to send them and for them to understand at some level? Well, this is a beautiful opportunity. Disclosure is sort of the ugly sibling that has traditionally been ignored as an obligation or a utility rather than something to be valued. And this is why I invoke what I call the Cinderella factor. If you think about it, in this noisy world, the suitor, right, the prince or knight in the Cinderella story, that's your donor. And they are looking for the foot that will fit their glass slipper. The glass slipper for some donors, the thing that they're looking for, that legitimacy, is this organization I want to give to and, kind of get married, right, have a relationship with by providing funds, is the perception that your organization keeps its affairs in order important to this donor. And if it is, that glass slipper, and they are looking for the Cinderella, which might be your disclosure statement. This opportunity exists on fundraising letters, donation receipts, annual statements, tweets, thank you pages, the list goes on. If you can include a legally required disclosure and turn that into a marketing opportunity, and maybe even follow with a CTA, follow with a call to action to get more involved, download something, or set themselves up for a recurring donation, then you are winning in the compliance game. And make sure that you don't hide behind the standard affirmation that your nonprofit's financial statements are a matter of public record. Many organizations say, go over here on our website to download our 990. And technically, yes, that does meet the legal requirements that you have to allow people to review your 990 and your financials, et cetera. But why not turn that from something that you keep in the back room and use it to broadcast nonprofits' legitimacy, accountability, and transparency to current and potential supporters? You can harness the power of disclosures to gain the trust of prospective donors, boost their giving, and improve your donor retention rates. And I just want to ask the attendants here, participants here, what other areas do you think you could use disclosures for? And where else could you share those and change your disclosures or update them so that they're more appealing, more engaging? And since somebody has to look at them and you have to send them anyway, why not turn those into something positive that will result in more volunteering, donations, and engagement? All right, let's move on to strategy number 4. You can train your team to message fundraising compliance across the board. So I just want to do a time check. We're at 2:28. We are about 15 minutes from our Q&A and our wrap up. And I just wanted to let you know, moving through to strategy number 4 and 5. So time can get away from you on these things. So let's talk about training your team to message fundraising compliance for you across the board. Now, it's important to create a stronger bond of trust between your organization and your stakeholders, and that requires bringing your compliance practices front and center team. You want to have compliance messaging be consistent across channels and across the donor spectrum, and what is a primary point of contact besides your website, besides your marketing materials for fundraising compliance. That's going to your staff, your volunteers, your board of directors, any stakeholder that you have. And so it's really important to make this something that is team-wide, understood as a part of your marketing message. And this reinforces the Cinderella factor, because tutor or prince can be anyone that you want to have real buy-in with your organization. And it includes primarily, first off, everyone inside the organization. As I said, from board of directors to volunteers. In copywriting, I learned years ago, that the reader or listener only hears the bullet point that applies to them. If you have a list of bullet points in a direct mail piece, for example, they'll gloss over the ones that don't pertain to the reader. The reader's going to notice that one that really just stands out to them. So if compliance is as important to someone or high in importance relative to your programs and your impact, then that is going to be a Cinderella factor for them. The hot button or decision point might be, between giving to your organization and another, it's going to be their perception of which group has its affairs in order. So having that strong, consistent message across the team to spread the message is huge. And finally, number 5, sponsorship opportunities. Now, most nonprofits believe that their programs and their impact is the most important. And that is absolutely, we wouldn't exist, as I said at the beginning of this conversation. No one started a nonprofit so that they can complete paperwork or engage in a massive amount of bureaucratic filings. However, for the people for whom this is important, you can actually survey your donors and ask them what's important. You might have people who came out of corporate and they worked in operations so that they know, and they not only know, but they're biased toward operational issues and things like compliance, as understanding that is the bedrock upon which your programs stand. Do not take care of operations and systems, and compliance is part of that. The organization really exists. And there is a small fraction of people, but a substantial fraction that understand that. You can actually turn something that might have been known as overhead from a negative to a positive by simply surveying your supporters and donors and making sure, or if you're surveying them already, inserting a question or two to find out who is oriented toward operations, who understands that these kinds of things are critical to the organization existing. And it's not all about the stuff that we love to put on the front page of our annual report or newsletter. You can discover who understands the importance of operations and then request that they sponsor compliance and operational costs. They will, first of all, feel that their money is going to something tangible that they can relate to, and that is really a leveraged opportunity, because what that does is it allows you to highlight to all the other donors that their money is going to the bottom line, because there is a trend, and it's just, I don't believe personally that it's a great trend that organizations are denying that they have overhead, operational costs, things that don't directly contribute to programs, are really, in the public eye, they're not looked at as positive, right? It's supposed to be, 100% of our donation is reaching the children. And the problem with that is that we all know, whether it's a household, a small company, a big corporation, or a nonprofit, there's no such thing as zero operational costs. So why not find out who can support that, so that the other people who are excited about the program and less excited about operations can feel that more of their donations are going to the programs. So I learned that way back when I did high dollar fundraising, and we would seek out certain people who were willing to fund the backbone of the operation so that the rest could be dedicated to programs. So what is the conclusion here? Where did we go on these five strategies? The conclusion here is really all about culture. These 5 strategies all roll up into what kind of culture is your nonprofit building. If you look at including compliance messaging as a chance to show that fundraising that compliance is not a washing exercise for your organization. It's not an afterthought, and that your commitment to ongoing best practices is true. You'll prove your commitment to integrity and transparency, and this will convey to everyone that it's not window dressing that takes a distant backseat to all of the important things your organization is doing, but that it's part of your culture. And in today's environment, everything you do is PR, everything you do is donor relations, everything is about building your brand and your culture. And those are your ultimate vehicle to convey your organization's values. You may have heard the statement, don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. Well, in this case, it's they don't value your programs. Your programs reflect your values. And if part of your value system is compliance, you will find that donors are more confident and will have less questions about these things and go ahead and get engaged. So it's values, culture, mission, programs, activities in that order that will make it a much more valuable practice for you to do compliance rather than a reluctant exercise. And we understand there are tons of roadblocks to making compliance easy. The problems are like every state has their own unique process. There is a massive turnover in nonprofits, as I mentioned earlier, and there's just focus on other things. So while this might feel like you're drinking from a fire hose, I'd like to transition now into what are the paths to get these things done. And in the past, it was either do it yourself or pay expensive professionals, accountants, attorneys, et cetera. But we at Instant Nonprofit have created an easy button for your nonprofit, whether it's the paperwork involved with starting a 501c3 or maintaining it. And we created a way that you can set your nonprofit annual maintenance filings on autopilot and avoid any of those nasty letters or, God forbid, revocation. We have customers come to us all the time who neglected to take care of their annual paperwork. And, we just want all of our nonprofits to operate freely and focus on their mission and their programs without stress, save that money so that they can move forward funding their programs more effectively, and just save time because organizations are generally strapped for time. So what is nonprofit? What is the autopilot that we're talking about? We have a turnkey service to guide you along and check your entity compliance at every level of governance. Each of our turnkey 501c3 maintenance packages starts with 4 fundamental components. Number 1, we do a compliance audit. It's like if you bring your car to the repair shop, you might think that the water pump is leaking, or that you have some particular problem. It's using a lot of gas, so it must be the fuel injection. But in fact, a professional needs to take a look and make sure that your assessment is accurate and that you didn't overlook at something. So we do a complete 5-point inspection. Second, we do the filings. We maintain those filings and inform you along the way. But the important thing is you don't have to sit there and check your calendar as to whether there's a filing due on a certain date. We do that for you. And then we also add compliance education. We have ongoing training, not only on compliance, but on things like how do we reseat donors at the end of the year, especially if smaller nonprofits that don't have systems built in already sometimes overlook those things, or they're trying to do that fourth quarter fundraising and they'd love a fresh template to send out to their donors, thanking them and acknowledging them. We have 12 modules where we get into everything that a nonprofit needs to do at different points throughout the year and provide templates, provide resources, and talk about some of the latest things that are happening in technology, for example. There are things that used to take a lot of work that are actually quite easy now. And so we cover those on a rolling basis every month. And then finally, we provide coaching. We provide monthly access to nonprofit experts so that you don't have to call an attorney or an accountant to get a nonprofit process-oriented issue resolved. Some people have questions, for example, about certain type in-kind gifts. Can I accept a car? Can I accept real estate or free rent somewhere? How do I give that write-off? And those are the kinds of things that we cover in our flight school, what we call flight school. So the product is called Autopilot and the coaching and training is called Flight School and Office Hours. Now, checking all levels of compliance, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but we have a lot of value built into this product. And I think everyone's going to be surprised at how inexpensively we're offering this, because we've built systems to manage all of this for you. So we have the filings, the audit, the training, and the coaching and ongoing support. And it's a ton of value. The main thing is that you're going to save 50 hours plus worth of time, save thousands in legal fees, particularly if you miss a filing and you want to make more of an impact the time that your staff and you have to run the organization. Now, what if you didn't need to take care of all these things yourself, or go out and find various sources, or God forbid, Google for different forums and different things that we can provide you in this program with the time that you have off? That would save you a massive amount of time and a massive amount of money. And so we have a ton of savings here because the nonprofit autopilot is only $37 a month. And for that $37 a month, have you on an ongoing inspection, ongoing filings, and ongoing coaching and training program that will cover everything that you need to maintain your 501c3. Yes, we can absolutely help you with fundraising compliance. We have fundraising training, how to do it, all the templates, et cetera. But the main thing is, right now, you need to make sure that your entity compliance is set on autopilot, and that is why we created this product. And we've really had a great reception for this and for our 501c3 startup service from even large organizations like Exponential. Exponential is the biggest church planting organization and conference in the country. And they send their folks to us to get their churches started when someone has a church plant. So whether you've checked in the law firms and compared pricing, all of that stuff, it's going to be hard to beat the value that you get in nonprofit autopilot for $37 a month. Angel Rebo, one of our customers, he is called the CEO Whisperer, CEO Confident. He has sent us many, many customers who also end up deciding to move forward with nonprofit autopilot, because our promise is that we are going to take this for you and you'll never miss a filing. Thank you very much, Jacob. I appreciate you in the chat here. Jacob Elzy is one of our customers, and he has called us to get his nonprofit not only up and running, but also compliant. And we keep those records for you, and we deliver everything in a custom portal. So not only do you access training on demand, sometimes I can't sleep, I watch videos, I decide to learn something if I have insomnia. And so you can always join our donor portal at any time. I'm sorry, our customer portal at any time, review your filings and check on the training that's available. Annette is asking about a good nonprofit accountant who can do a 990 easy. Well, that is absolutely something we can also help with. So we're going to provide some links here to book a call, learn more, or just simply sign up for nonprofit autopilot. We want you to not worry. We want to go into the Q&A session here and answer all your questions and help you get your 501c3 good standing and stay in good standing. And hopefully it's not the case, but if you've been revoked or if you had a solution of your nonprofit corporation, we can help get you back on track at any time. Kevin, I am really excited to answer some questions. So why don't we move into that section?
That sounds good. If you've been submitting your questions here throughout the webinar, I think Jordan is the one collecting the questions.
Let's talk about the nonprofit accountant who can do a 990 easy. We can certainly help refer you to a service who can not only take care of your bookkeeping, but take care of your accounting as well. We are very careful about the partners that we have, and that's why we're really excited to be in cahoots with Stewardship Technology, because they deliver a consistent service and they do it really well. And so we haven't really been in the business of farming out different offers, to various partners without really knowing that they can deliver. But if there is anything that you have a question on, I'm going to provide an email here where you can just email any general question. We'll also provide some call link where you can book a call, or if you're ready, you could simply sign up for the nonprofit autopilot. So I'll let Kevin go here. I cannot type and talk at the same time, but any questions that you have, go ahead and put them in the chat.
All right, I'm going to talk a little bit about an issue that I had So I started my first nonprofit in 2014, and I did not know what I was doing, and I paid way too much for the attorney to start it. And one of the things that I ran into was in the state of Pennsylvania, there is something that you have to do every 10 years. Now, do you think that I remembered? I'm sure somebody told me, but that I remembered that 10 years was going to happen. I ran into a big issue because we weren't doing the types of things that we needed to in order to be prepared for that report. And so that was quite a problem. And we had to go back into our accounting system and figure that out, and I had to pay everybody. So if I would have known that it was under $40 a month back then, I would have done it and saved quite a bit of money. Also, any of you who are in California, God bless you. It's the worst state to have a nonprofit in.
It may be.
The types of things that you need to do with franchise tax board, registering your nonprofit with the what is the Justice Department, the things that they make you do. Are there any of you in a state where you feel like the compliance is particularly difficult?
I know that Washington, we are seeing a lot of activity out of Washington State due to the many regulations that are being introduced there. And we do also we have a payroll service, and we've seen an explosion of concerns in Washington related to payroll because they have a new Family Leave Act. They have the pay stub in Washington has more line items than I know what to do with, than the Encyclopedia Britannica. So absolutely, the states are introducing more and more, and we are staying on top of those regulations. Are
there any more questions? Are there any more questions from anyone?
Camera on. I wish I could turn my camera on, but if you have any questions, keep putting them in the chat and we'll cover them. San Diego, AJ, completely understand. There are so many agencies. California has not made it easy for anyone to operate. And we get many questions every month as well as to the franchise fee that California charges to every LLC and corporation. Thankfully, nonprofits are exempt from that. But now California is requiring forms to be submitted. They're not automatically exempting organizations. They're requiring you to submit some forms. And we, in fact, include that in our California version of the, and I will issue a caveat, it's slightly more in California because of those additional filings you're required to do. It's slightly more in California for the initial year of the nonprofit autopilot. Some of those things can be gotten out of the way in the first year and then goes to a more normal schedule. Aaron is saying, I am a new nonprofit in Chicago and interested in fundraising and donors. Love that. Get in touch. You can either sign up to book a call or simply email success at I put support before. That's for our customer service. I'm going to put a different email here in the chat. And that is just a testament to prove that I cannot type and talk at the same time. So success and nonprofit, success at Instant Nonprofit is the email to send any questions or to engage more so that we can help you with things like fundraising, managing donors, and keeping up with records. There are simple CRMs. Many nonprofits start out with a spreadsheet, but there are simple CRMs that you can use to, at an early stage that aren't overwhelming, like Salesforce or Blackbaud's products, et cetera. And Kevin's got experience in that. I know that we have experience as well, and we can make some recommendations on simple systems that you can use to manage your donors and get beyond a spreadsheet, which can make it really difficult when it comes time to annual receipt, et cetera. All right, let's see. AJ mentioned two organizations here, the Paul Lloyd Warner Foundation and Waterfall Music. So there's a for-profit and a nonprofit. And I'm so glad that question came up, because we deal with a lot of authors, speakers, people who have maybe gone through some pain and transformed and been able to overcome everything from addiction to domestic abuse, etc. And so maybe you have a book, or maybe you have a process that you bring people through that is proprietary, and you want to retain the intellectual property of that, but make sure that it benefits people. And what we often recommend is starting a for-profit and a nonprofit alongside of each other, so that the nonprofit can propagate that message, build the community, and help other people, but still allow the ownership of that intellectual property to be held by the individual who came up with it, right? If you're the founder and you've come up with a breakthrough process to heal, or some life-giving information, you might want to keep that book or that process, that course in your possession as an individual, and not give the intellectual property over to the nonprofit, but allow the nonprofit to rightfully take that life-giving message and information and bring it out to the world. And there are easy ways to do that by allowing the nonprofit to utilize it and sell the book at cost, or hold conferences and do all those things while maintaining that intellectual property. And because AJ mentioned music, that is very common with you musicians. Maybe you publish songs, but you want to be able to bless the world with the music that you're able to create. And you can do that through a nonprofit while retaining the ownership of those songs. I don't know if Kevin, if you have experience with that beyond that, but I see some other questions coming in. Thanks, Aaron.
Laura had a really cool question. She said she's running into a problem with database profiles like Charity Navigator, because they get stuck on non-discrimination, because they actually do discriminate based on their code of conduct or statement of faith. Is there a way for them to increase their score in those donor databases, or?
Yes. So what were the data? It cut out for just a second. What was the database you're referring to?
She gave Charity Navigator as an example, but one of the check marks on there is whether you have a non-discrimination section approved, and they do discriminate based on faith. So
absolutely. So the way to navigate that typically is, the protected status, protected types of status enshrined in US law. And we are seeing more of a collision between religious beliefs and practices and faith belief, faith and what government is allowing. But in most cases, race, gender, and other protected status does not conflict with religious belief. So it really comes down to looking at the particular language about what that database is requiring, and then crafting something in your statement that satisfies the requirements without violating your principles and your statements of faith. And again, that can be taken on a case-by-case basis, and we would be happy to to help walk you through that on a free strategy call. And I know Jordan is going to be dropping the link in for a more generic, right? If you're not starting your nonprofit, you need a more generic book a call opportunity, and we're going to drop that in the chat here. So not sure, I don't know, Annette, that we can answer that particular question on whether Charity Navigator ranks or gives its stamp of approval based on your hiring process versus whom you serve. But again, these things are of interest to us in general, because we these regulations are constantly changing, and you do want to be featured by great nonprofits, Charity Navigator, and the rest. So we'll feel.
Annette, I can tell you, I know of a Catholic nonprofit that has platinum. I think it's Charity Navigator or one of them. They're the top. They're platinum on there, and they do discriminate on their hiring, because they're hiring only Catholics or clergy. So there is a way. I can't tell you how, but there's definitely a way. Or I can maybe, if you can't figure out the answer to that with Instant Nonprofit, then reach out to me. I'll drop my email in here and I can put you in touch with that organization and you can chat with them.
And I am just dropping a link right now into the chat here for Annette and anyone else. Granted, it may not be me on the call if we do get a lot of call requests, but this is my direct executive call, 30-minute call, where you can pretty much drop anything into that sign up. Let us know what the issue is. It's really important if we get a little background ahead of time, because then we can be prepared going into the call to answer whatever question it is you have. And of course, we can't be an open-ended consultancy or free law firm, but we can certainly look into these things and answer those questions as best we can. So go ahead and hit that Calendly link, and you can book calls starting on Monday of next week. Tomorrow is going to be a little bit jammed up for those calls, and we want to make sure that we can serve everyone. So feel free to go ahead and whatever you've got, it's kind of ask us anything. We also have a weekly, we call it what the FAQ, frequently asked questions, and you can hop on there on any Thursday or before any Thursday, submit your questions. And then when we come around to Thursday at 11 a.m. Mountain Time, we'll answer any question. It gives us the time to go do the research, and then we're answering the question and serving the larger community by answering that question for everyone, because chances are if you have that question, someone else does too.
All right, we are now close to time. I'm going to give everyone time for a bio break before their next meeting. So appreciate you, Christian, for coming on. Thank you to the Instant Nonprofit team for all the resources that you put together. All of you who are on this webinar will receive a follow-up with a download of some of the information that was shared today. And if we can serve you here at Stewardship, help with your online giving needs, then I have in the chat box a quick demo sign up. Thank you all for taking the time out of your day, and thank you for the work that you're doing to serve our community, to serve the people and the animals and the communities globally. We really appreciate you. You represent what motivates us and what keeps us going. So thank you for the work that you do. God bless you all. If you have any questions, we will stay on, but I want to make sure everyone feels free to leave prior to any calls that are coming up against the hour.
Absolutely. I'm willing to stay a few more minutes here and answer any questions that come up. However, if you need to run, thank you so much for attending, and we really appreciate you and look forward to speaking with you. I can see some calls are being booked, and I know that we're going to run into questions that are really going to help us build our muscles in what is going on with these online databases, with the strategies that we've talked about, and we will come up with new and enlightening information to share with the world by you asking questions and engaging with us. So we thank you so much for that. Thank you, Aaron. Thanks, Jacob, AJ, Jordan, and Will. Thank you, part of our team. Thank you, Annette, for coming. We really appreciate everybody hopping on and asking these questions. I don't see any new questions coming, Kevin, but I think we're about wrapping up anyway. But if anyone has anything to drop in at the last minute here, go ahead and do that. And if we don't see anything, we are going to sign off and say sayonara. Tony Rockus, Tony, wonderful to see you. And Hugh Ballou, awesome. Hugh is such a good friend, AJ. That's wonderful. I really appreciate you being here. And Hugh is a good friend and certainly an amazing nonprofit leader.
Thanks, everyone.
Have a wonderful day. Signing off, and we'll see you later.